What if I told you that one of the very few players who shared the pitch with Lionel Messi and faced Cristiano Ronaldo at his most ruthless believes that we have all been asking the wrong question for more than 15 years? Not a journalist, not a former coach chasing headlines, but a man who lived inside that rivalry every single day. Pedro Rodríguez never shouted, he never fought in interviews, he never needed to pick a side. And maybe that is exactly why, when Pedro finally broke his silence about Messi and Ronaldo, his words hit harder than any statistic. Because when someone who assisted Messi in a Champions League final and was eliminated by Ronaldo's Real Madrid at their peak says that these two legends were never playing the same game, you stop scrolling, you listen. Before we go any further, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and stay until the end, because this story might force you to rethink everything you thought you knew about the greatest rivalry in football history. Pedro Rodríguez is not the first name that comes to mind when people talk about Messi or Ronaldo, and that is precisely what makes his testimony so dangerous. He was never built as a star. He was built as a mechanism. Pedro was part of the Barcelona machine at its absolute peak, the era when football stopped looking like football and started looking like geometry. He played alongside Messi when the Argentine was not just scoring goals, but rewriting the way space worked on a pitch. Pedro did not need to dominate the ball. He needed to understand Messi's movement half a second before it happened. At the same time, Pedro also faced Cristiano Ronaldo in the most violent years of the Clásico. Not the Ronaldo of highlight reels, but the Ronaldo who scored 50, sometimes 60 goals a season, who punished every mistake, who turned Champions League nights into executions. Here is the contrast that numbers reveal but never explain. Messi, even at 38, still leads charts with more than 70 goal contributions in a single season. Ronaldo, at his peak, averaged almost a goal per game for years, across different leagues, different systems, different countries. In Pedro was there, inside both storms. So when someone like him refuses to say Messi is better or Ronaldo is greater, and instead claims that they were never playing the same game, the question is no longer who is the GOAT. The real question becomes far more uncomfortable. Have we been comparing the incomparable all along? Pedro did not speak when Barcelona were winning everything. He did not speak when Messi was collecting Ballon d'Ors like routine trophies. And he certainly did not speak when Ronaldo was silencing stadiums across Europe. Because when you are inside history, you are not allowed to interpret it. For years, Pedro stayed quiet. He played his role, scored decisive goals, lifted trophies, and disappeared from the spotlight the moment the celebrations ended. While others were building narratives, choosing sides, fueling rivalries, Pedro was doing something far more difficult. He was observing. It was only after the noise faded, after the shirts changed, the stadiums emptied, and the rivalry became memory, that Pedro finally allowed himself to speak honestly. Not in a dramatic press conference, not with a headline-hunting quote, but in a calm reflection, almost uncomfortable in its simplicity. Pedro admitted that whenever journalists asked him the same question, Messi or Ronaldo, he felt that something was fundamentally wrong with the question itself, because from inside the pitch, the experience of playing with Messi felt nothing like preparing to face Ronaldo. One was not a duel. The other was not a comparison. One was immersion. The other was survival. Pedro described training sessions where Messi barely spoke, barely celebrated, yet controlled everything without raising his voice. And then he described nights against Ronaldo where the tension was so high that a single defensive error felt like a death sentence. And that was when Pedro said something that stopped the room. He said that Messi and Ronaldo were not competing on the same terms because they were solving football in two completely different ways. And suddenly, the greatest rivalry in history did not look like a straight line anymore. It looked like two parallel worlds. When Pedro spoke about Lionel Messi, he did not start with goals. He did not start with trophies, and he did not start with records. He started with silence. Pedro explained that Messi's presence on the pitch was not loud, not dramatic, not theatrical. There were no speeches, no gestures, no demands, and yet everything moved around him. Playing with Messi, according to Pedro, felt less like following a leader and more like being absorbed into a rhythm. The ball did not belong to Messi, it passed through him, and once it did, the game reorganized itself. Pedro described moments when he would make a run without even asking for the ball because he knew Messi had already seen it, not guessed it, seen it, as if the future of the play had already been decided somewhere else. This is where the numbers begin to make sense. 70 goal contributions in a season do not come from ambition alone. They come from gravity, from the way Messi pulled defenders, time, and space towards himself, allowing others to exist more freely. Pedro insisted that Messi never forced the game, he dissolved it.
Defenders were not defeated by power, but by inevitability. You did not feel outplayed, you felt late, always half a second late. And that is why Pedro believed that measuring Messi by the same standards as Ronaldo was misleading, because Messi didn't chase goals. Goals chased the consequences of his decisions. In Pedro's words, Messi did not ask football to adapt to him. Football adapted because it had no other choice. And when someone who played next to him at the highest level tells you that, you begin to understand something unsettling. Messi was not trying to dominate the game. He was redefining it while pretending nothing special was happening. If playing with Messi felt like entering a current you could not escape, then facing Cristiano Ronaldo felt like standing in front of a weapon that was always loaded. Pedro was very clear about this difference. Against Ronaldo, there was no illusion of control. You could dominate possession, you could press for 90 minutes, you could believe you were winning the battle, and then in one movement, everything ended. Pedro described preparing for matches against Ronaldo as an exercise in fear management, not fear of skill, fear of punishment, because Ronaldo did not need the game to flow, he only needed it to break once. Where Messi dissolved defenses through accumulation, Ronaldo attacked them through rupture. Pedro recalled how every cross, every second ball, every rebound inside the box carried the same thought. If he touches it, it's over. And that pressure changed everything. Defenders dropped deeper, midfielders hesitated. Space disappeared not because Ronaldo took it, but because teams gave it away. This is where Ronaldo's numbers speak louder than poetry. 50 goals, sometimes 60, season after season, in different leagues, different systems, different languages. Pedro acknowledged something uncomfortable for many fans. Ronaldo forced the entire game to adapt to him. Teams adjusted their shape, coaches rewrote their plans, fullbacks stopped attacking, center backs lost sleep, because Ronaldo didn't wait for the perfect moment. He created it through obsession. And this, Pedro explained, is why comparing Messi and Ronaldo through the same lens was always doomed to fail, because one bent the game until it followed him, the other attacked it until it surrendered. Facing Ronaldo was not about reading football, it was about surviving it. And that is why Pedro never felt he was facing the same kind of genius. He was facing a different kind of inevitability. Pedro's words do not just challenge a rivalry, they expose a historical mistake. Football has always compared legends, but rarely has it compared them so obsessively, so relentlessly, and so superficially. Goals versus assists, trophies versus trophies, numbers against numbers. But Pedro reminded us that history never worked like that. No one measured Johan Cruyff by Pelé's goal tally. No one reduced Diego Maradona to Michel Platini's consistency, because those players were understood as systems, not statistics. What made Messi and Ronaldo different was not only their greatness, but their simultaneity, two anomalies existing at the same time, forcing the world to choose, to divide, to argue, and in doing so, football forgot how to contextualize. Pedro believed that Messi and Ronaldo represented two answers to the same impossible question. How do you dominate a game that resists domination? Messi answered by dissolving structure. Ronaldo answered by overwhelming it. The mistake was assuming there could be a single scale to measure both. History does not repeat identical legends, it creates contrasts. And Messi and Ronaldo were not mirror images, they were opposites born at the same moment. Pedro's confession forces us to confront something uncomfortable. Perhaps the greatest rivalry in football history was never about who was better. Perhaps it was about whether we were capable of understanding two forms of greatness at once. And perhaps we failed. Pedro's confession also reveals something far more uncomfortable than a rivalry. It exposes what modern football has become. At some point, the Messi-Ronaldo debate stopped being about football. It turned into a battlefield of screenshots, charts, and selective memory. One side counting goals, the other counting assists. One shouting Champions League nights, the other whispering control, tempo, and invisibility. Pedro watched this transformation from the outside, almost with disbelief, because inside the dressing room, nobody spoke like that. Players did not argue about decimals. They spoke about fear, relief, inevitability. They spoke about moments when the ball felt heavier against Ronaldo, and moments when it felt lighter around Messi. Pedro noticed how fans began to weaponize statistics the same way defenders once tried to weaponize tactics against Ronaldo, desperately, and just like on the pitch, it never truly worked. Numbers began to erase context. Messi's 70 goal contributions in a season became not enough if Ronaldo had more goals. Ronaldo's 60 goal seasons became empty if Messi controlled the game more elegantly. Football was no longer watched, it was audited. Pedro understood something crucial. The rivalry survived not because Messi and Ronaldo fed it, but because the world needed it. Television needed it, social media needed it. Football needed a binary story in an era that struggles with complexity. And so the comparison never stopped. Even when Messi adopted to new leagues, even when Ronaldo conquered new countries, even when time itself began to win. Pedro believed that the greatest injustice of this era was not choosing sides. It was forgetting that football greatness is not a single road, but a landscape. Messi walked through it like a cartographer, drawing invisible maps. Ronaldo attacked it like a conqueror, planting flags everywhere he went. In history, Pedro feared might one day flatten all of this into a single sentence, unless we remember how different it truly was to live through it. Pedro never told us who the greatest player of all time is. And maybe that is the most honest thing anyone has said about Messi and Ronaldo. Because his confession does not end the debate, it reframes it. Messi and Ronaldo were not rivals in the traditional sense. They were two answers to football's most difficult question, expressed in two radically different languages. One rewrote the game from within, the other conquered it from the outside. And perhaps the real tragedy is not choosing sides. Perhaps it's that we spend 15 years arguing instead of understanding. Now it's your turn. Do Pedro's words change the way you see the Messi-Ronaldo rivalry? Tell us in the comments, like the video if this story made you think, and subscribe to the channel for more confessions without filters from those who are truly there.